Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today I would like to talk about the differences between animal roleplay and pet play. One of my patrons on Discord was talking with me earlier today, and they were mentioning that they were watching one of my previous videos. I believe it was my exotic pet guide video, and they said that in there I had briefly mentioned animal roleplay as opposed to pet play, but that I didn't really expand on it and I didn't really define it, and they wanted to know more about what that was and what that meant and why I consider them different. And I realized I don't really remember the context of what I said in that video or why I said it or anything, so I was like, well, let's just make a whole video talking about it, because I do think it is a really important topic, and I think there is a lot of confusion and conflation, as per usual, in the community when we talk about different terms or how people define things. And I really like to clear it up, because I think part of having a good community is having clear, concise use of language and a mutual understanding of what different terms mean. And it's also really helpful for knowing, when I do cover certain subjects, what my own personal definitions are. So before I get too much into today's topic, I would first like to define how I see pet play. Now, normally what I would do is I would just refer you guys to like one of my older videos and be like, hey, I talked about it for like 20 minutes here. But my basic definitions of pet play and BDSM are some of my older videos, or some of the first ones I did on my channel. And while I don't necessarily want to say that I disagree with them, my definition has definitely expanded and changed in the last 2 years. I've just had so much more education, I've gone to more classes, I've had more time to experience my own relationship with pet play, I've had time to meet more people who do pet play themselves. It's different, I believe, than what it first started out as. So how I would personally see pet play is it is a form of animal role play where, in a BDSM context, at least one of the participants is behaving or acting as a pet specifically. Now, I know a lot of people will define pet play around parameters involving DS or power exchange. I only defined it this way as well. I'm especially guilty of doing it when I'm not thinking about my words very clearly, because it's just a very impulsive thing. I think it's one of the more common definitions and ways that people talk about pet play is around the power exchange axis. But I don't necessarily think that's fair to people who do pet play that don't involve power exchange in their play. And there are a lot of ways to do pet play that have nothing to do with power exchange, or that can have their power exchange elements removed by the participants. So, for example, you could have 3 people who are all role-playing as puppies at a mosh in a BDSM dungeon and playing together. And that is definitely BDSM, and it is also definitely pet play. You can also have somebody who is playing alone and put themselves in a cage in a dungeon that's a coffee table, and they have full leather puppy gear on, but nobody is directly playing with them. They're sort of part of the background, part of the furniture. That's also definitely pet play, and that person is definitely role-playing as a pet in a BDSM context in that particular moment. And there's 100 different examples I could give where people are doing pet play that doesn't involve power exchange, that doesn't involve a relationship, that doesn't involve a lot of the more common ways online that we talk about pet play. But suffice to say that not all of it is based around a power exchange element, and so I don't think that definition is the best one or gives a complete picture of what pet play is. I don't have any problem with people who see it that way, because I think this definition definitely comes from a lot of people's personal experience and their personal motivations about why they do pet play, and that it's totally okay. I know power exchange is one of the big things for me, so it is part of personally how I see my relationship with pet play, but it's not true for everybody, and I don't think it's fair to categorize it that way. I can see a couple of reasons why this definition might happen. I think the big one is that it's the online community. It's simultaneously big and insular at the same time, so you get like one person's definition that somebody will latch onto, and people will kind of put maybe a little bit of their own spin on it, but basically kind of go off of that if it makes sense to them, because they're not really necessarily being exposed to a lot of outside ideas, because, hey, that makes sense that they said that, it makes sense to me, let's just go with that. And there's not necessarily a lot of like core idea questioning online, because it's people who have a very similar relationship with pet play, and it attracts people who also have a similar relationship to it. I think as well, it's one of the ways that people can try and put up a wall between minors being able to participate in the community or not, because you have people who say that you can't do BDSM or you can't do pet play because you're not old enough to engage in power exchange. And while that's true, that doesn't mean that the reason why they can't do pet play is solely because of the power exchange element. It's because it's BDSM. not just because of the power cajolment of BDSM, although I think that is a very powerful persuasion tool, let's say, to claiming why minors can't be part of the BDSM community, and it's one that I definitely agree with. And if anybody's interested in hearing my perspective on what I think about minors in BDSM and pet play and all that stuff, I've talked about it in so many of my live streams. I've talked about it in a lot of videos. I have a whole video specifically just dedicated to that subject, so if you want to know more about what I think about that, there's plenty of resources there. Okay, so now we have a good working definition of what pet play is, so we can move on and start comparing it with animal role play. But first, I think we need to back up a little bit, because I actually see pet play and animal role play as both falling under the same larger umbrella, and I think they are even very connected in that way, because both pet play and animal role play are actually just forms of role play. And I don't have a great way of defining exactly what role play is, so hopefully it will just be sufficient to say that role play is when you are taking on a different role in some fashion. Now within role play, there are tons of different categories. There is medical role play, which then can be doctor role play, nurse role play, surgery role play. There is also maid role play. There's also police officer role play, interrogation role play. There's a lot of stuff that falls under role play, but not all of them have to be BDSM related, and I would even say that most of them aren't, and not everybody who's motivated to do role play does so because of BDSM. So role play, not inherently linked with BDSM. It can be for sexual reasons, it can be for non-sexual reasons, it can be for LARPing, for cosplay, for like a million different reasons. People just do role play because it's fun, and that's really all you need to know. And as I mentioned, there are different categories within role play. One of them is animal role play, and all that means is a person acting like an animal in some fashion. It can be a fantasy creature, it can be a dinosaur, it can be a made-up animal, it can be a pet. Now I do want to also specifically mention that there are people who role play as human pets. That is, they are acting as a pet who is a human, but they don't have any other sort of outside animal identifier like cat or dog or horse or something like that. And humans are still animals, so it definitely makes sense that would still fall under the animal role play category, although depending on the context and the motivators, people may see it a bit differently. But anyways, just wanted to briefly mention that in case I got any questions about it in the comments. Now, like roleplay in general, animal roleplay doesn't have a specific relationship to BDSM, although it can again be a motivator and it can be a component of BDSM. It's not inherently linked with it. It can be for sexual reasons again, it can be for non-sexual reasons. Any things that I talked about for roleplay in general can be applied to animal roleplay as a motivator. So it's not inherently linked with BDSM. Now within animal roleplay, you have different subsets even within that. Pet play is one of those. So it's really one thing nested inside of the other. Pet play is animal roleplay, but not all animal roleplay is pet play. Pet play is inherently linked with BDSM, animal roleplay is not. And specifically with pet play, and what I would like to get into here is pet play involves somebody in the pet play scene or relationship or activity being a pet. And this is the thing that really bugs me, and this is kind of where I might get a little bit ranty, so I'm sorry. But I see a lot of people in the BDSM community using pet play to mean any form of animal role play that occurs in a BDSM context. You can use the term animal roleplay to refer to BDSM activities. It's okay, so long as you acknowledge that animal roleplay is not inherently linked with BDSM. But some of it is. And I don't think it really makes sense to call everything that's involving animal roleplay in BDSM as pet play when there's no pets involved, it doesn't involve anybody being a pet or domestication or anything like that. To me, it just doesn't. They're not the same thing, and it gets treated like pet play is a lot more general than I think it is. A good example of this would be like if you're doing a scene where one person is role-playing as a bear and the other person is role-playing as like a prey animal, like a rabbit or something. That's not pet play. There's no pet relationship happening there. One of the characters, one of the actors in it is not a pet, unless maybe if you were doing it within like a really specific context where somebody was like, it was a pet rabbit that got escaped and then there's this bear that's hunting them and then the human has to like come and save them or something, I don't know. But unless one of the animals in it is specifically a pet animal, and it could be a pet wolf, it could be a pet tiger, it could be a pet whatever, but it has to be a pet, not just any kind of animal. And there's nothing wrong with calling it animal roleplay. It's not a dirty term, it's not wrong, it's not vanilla, it just is what it is. And I think we should be more specific with our terms, because I think by using the term pet play, we are simultaneously including way too many things in that term. But then from the outside, there are lots of people who want to have specific elements or scenes or dynamics and think that they have to try and fit into the pet play label, because that's what they conceive of. Oh, this is how this type of role play works in BDSM, so I have to figure out how to like shoehorn the thing that I want to do into that, otherwise it's not really BDSM. Pet play does not have exclusive domain over animal BDSM role play stuff. You can call it animal roleplay, it's fine, and I think more people should take advantage of using that term and expand the potential possibilities of what they can do with their scenes and not limit it necessarily to just being a pet, while simultaneously also sort of preserving the definition of what pet play is. But anyways, that's basically everything I wanted to talk about in today's video. If you guys have any comments or questions, please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. If you want to see more from me, my social media, check out my Patreon, all that stuff, I will put links to it down in the description box if you want to check that out, as well as related videos and all of that great stuff if you are curious. And until I see you guys next time, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.